Welcome. So we've got a video recording that we're doing with Lynsey and Donna around energy limiting conditions, and we've decided that we're going to move this into a chat. I've got loads of questions prepared, but we think just a conversation is going to be great to help those people that might see this video and want to get something about how they can support themselves and how others can support them. Lynsey, do you want to go first? You're well known to me. I know you, Lynsey, but introduce yourself for us.
So thanks, Vicky. So I'm Lynsey Woodman. I am a specialist occupational therapist, and I'm also the clinical lead with the ME Chronic Fatigue Service in Lincolnshire. And we see adults and children and mild to severe cases of ME CFS in our Lincolnshire catchment area.
Great stuff, and it's a pleasure to see you again, Lynsey. And Donna, we've only just met, literally, and we've pulled you into this call to have a conversation with us. But from the 30 seconds that I've spoken to you, I can tell that you get it. So, Donna, please introduce yourself.
So, hello, and thank you, Vicky, for inviting me on this call. And I think the best conversations are the ones that just happen, and they're meant to be. So I am Donna Hutchinson. I work alongside Lynsey in the ME CFS Service in Lincolnshire, and I'm a specialist generalist by background. That is a GP in general terms, and I have 30 years experience within the NHS and supporting people through all stages of their life, the good and the bad, and what it is to be human. So really grateful to be on this call.
And you have a very specialist interest in chronic conditions, don't you, Donna?
I have a very specialist interest in invisible illnesses. Invisible illnesses are the ones that are most distressing for people, because trying to assert oneself in terms of I don't feel well, but no one else gets it, that is a deeply distressing position to be in.
And that's something we hear from all the people involved with the work that we do around co-production, people with experience of these conditions, is that invisibility. I love the way you describe that. So what do we mean? We're calling it energy limiting conditions for the sake of what we do. You've got ME, CFS, you've got invisible conditions. What sort of things are we talking about here?
I think you might be best placed to answer this, Donna, to unpick the whole spectrum of, because energy is everything, isn't it? And energy limitations come in with multiple conditions that people are diagnosed with, but obviously there are specific criteria for our service, under NICE guidelines, that we make sure to ensure that people are safely and their needs are met through other medical pathways that maybe need looking at. So maybe you could explain how we distinguish between what is ME/CFS and what is an energy limiting problem, or what we might often term as multifactorial fatigue, debilitating fatigue.
This is a $1 million question, and it really depends on how long we've got. And I wouldn't want to do a disservice to anybody. Sometimes it becomes a moot point in terms of the labelling. Now, labels can be helpful because for many it gives validation and a diagnostic certainty, because uncertainty is very difficult to live with. When we're talking about an energy limiting condition, what we're really looking at is the assimilation of how much energy does the body require for its basic functions, human survival. And then what we want is additional energy for life. So not simply surviving, but thriving in our life. So any illness, and it doesn't matter if it's ME/CFS or it's something else, which truly affects the ability for somebody to engage in life in all aspects of life, such that the energy that their body is producing is insufficient to meet the demands both real or perceived, placed on the body, that means its ability to operate efficiently within its energy envelope is inhibited. So that could be an illness with physicality that other people may recognize. For example, I have a musculoskeletal illness. So I have one that could be acute in that I've broken a leg and I can't do things in a normal way, and I am having to rely on other people and find new ways to do things. Or it could be an invisible illness in terms of fibromyalgia. It could be an illness such as, or a chronic condition such as diabetes. If we're then managing with how do we fuel our body, how does our body operate under these conditions, that could have implications for energy. If we're talking about emotional well-being, are we in an energy accelerating state, or are we in an energy depleting state? So it would be really difficult to pinpoint there's one thing, because there are multiple layers. And in any given moment, someone may have the energy in that moment so that they're in a state of calm, alive, and everything is accessible. And then in the very next moment, for whatever reason, and it could be the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back, they may then find that they are depleted. And that can be really difficult in people saying, well, sometimes I can do this and sometimes I can't. And one of the things that we do in our service is try and move beyond simply the diagnostic label and say, right, this is where you're at. These are all the layers that may be influencing or vying for your attention or making things more challenging than they need to be. How can we support you, advocate for you, or be that coach that you need to find some resources that work for you? Not because we're saying them, because our life, our experience is different from your life and your experience. And the wisest person in the room for any individual is themselves.
Brilliant. That you're the wisest person in the room. That sounds, you know, perfect to me. And would you say that one of the things that is often misunderstood is that fluctuation, that today I've got some energy, tomorrow I haven't? You know, is that what people misunderstand, and those around them?
It's very difficult to understand, because people, either those that are in their wider network, will say, well, why can't you just do this? You know, that word just, which can be hugely triggering for someone who is really trying their best, when there isn't that knowing of, well, why are things different now? It can be very difficult, particularly in the depleted energy state that we're in, when we're trying to control the outcomes and mitigate for all eventualities. It can be very difficult to understand, well, what am I doing today that was different, that means that I now can't operate in this particular manner? And that's because every single system in the body, mind and body connected, is speaking universally all the time, and it oscillates. So everything is oscillating and trying to get back into balance. And if there's something else that has just moved it beyond its balance, it may take more energy in that moment to return to a sense of stability. And people can tie themselves up in knots thinking, but I was able to do that and now I can't do that. So that is even more worrying for me, in terms of, well, I have no idea what to do anymore.
So is there something about that that lack of control? Because you say, you know, you quite rightly said, you know, the wisest person in the room is the person themselves, but they might have that sense of lack of control over their energy and what's going on for them.
I think
Is
it's
that
the paradigm that I think the medical profession is working on, in that I don't feel right. You know, you'll see a GP, you'll have lots of blood tests and be told, probably likely, either, you know, well, this is wrong, let's treat that, but then that's treated and you're still tired, or, you know, everything's okay. And you're like, well, this doesn't make sense, because it's not explained through probably a bigger paradigm that we would kind of feed into, of the human body and what the building blocks of health, the pillars of health need, and what the body needs to be in a healing state. And, you know, for many, and maybe many with more multifactorial fatigue, they can probably accept, yes, I know this condition I have will accept, you know, have some level of fatigue to it, and X, Y, Z. However, this feels disproportionate. And I think there's a lot to do with how, as human beings, we are meaning making machines. We want to have meaning. We want to understand something. And so when we're just being told it can't be that, you're okay, or everyone's sort of, our family is saying, oh, you look really well today, but we don't necessarily feel it, we start to become more distressed within. We might give the proverbial, you know, face that, oh, right, you know, and I'll just soldier on then. But we're not actually listening to the language the body's trying to tell us, you know. And a body in a state of threat, either it's threat coming from not being validated or heard properly or acknowledged by those around you, keeps in, you know, all illness is inflammation, you know, and inflammation is fueled by this, the way we construct things, by our actions, by so many different things, you know. And to actually enable a human being to get into a good healing state, they need to understand what's going on, or many people need a level of understanding to start to shift the dial towards, you know, what the things they can start to control again. Because when they start to feel, you know, that felt better when I did it like that, but nobody told me that, and I've just kept going because I need to, I can't stop working, or I can't stop looking after my kids or caring for, you know, my family members, whatever that may be. It's all of those. It's so much. Health is just a big, vast picture.
And that all feels, it sounds really exhausting in itself. There's not just the physical, there's the emotional, the psychological, the whole relationships that are going on.
The environment you're trying to exist in, if that's not supporting you, or if work isn't supportive, or maybe the primary healthcare people that you're seeing aren't necessarily making you feel heard or understood. And so, you know, it just leads people into feeling quite hopeless and enormous guilt and frustration that they can't be the people they want to be. And it's the classic, you know, well, you seemed all right yesterday, well, why aren't you okay today then? Because you haven't got a broken arm to wave at them, or a piece of paper to say, look, this is actually what's wrong with me. And that is really distressing for a human being. But there's tons of invisible illnesses out there. It's just certain ones. Hello, Pussycat. Mine might come along in a minute. You know, there's certain ones that seem to have, you know, quite a negative perception. People don't really understand how debilitating excessive tiredness can be, because they just see it as, I've had a hard day, put my feet up, have a good rest, and off we go again. It's sort of beyond that, because there's different mechanisms in the body that are contributing. Would you agree, Donna?
Absolutely. And I think language is really powerful. And those of us that are in any healthcare role, I feel it is our duty to be very careful with the language that we use, because language creates. And when somebody is in a state of distress, what they pick up and take away may not be the message that we were trying to impart. And so checking for someone's understanding of what we have said and what they've heard can be incredibly important. And to give a case in point, and this is one of the ways in which the brain works, the brain is primed to find meaning in things and to keep us safe. And in order to do that in the most efficient manner, it will delete, distort, and make generalizations. It's just the most efficient way of doing things, because otherwise we are constantly overwhelmed with the amount of sensory inputs, the data inputs that are coming to us. And this is where, for example, those individuals who are neurodivergent may be even more challenged with additional information and being able to tune out of non-essential data. And that's an overwhelming state for the body to be in. But for example, a doctor may say to somebody, all your tests are normal. Brain says, I don't feel right. Body says, I don't feel right. I don't trust my signals anymore then. What's going on? Am I making it up? Are they saying that I'm making it up? Where do I go with this? This is quite frightening. Or a doctor might say, you shouldn't have this pain anymore. We would expect this pain to have gone by now. So brain and body say, there must be something seriously wrong with me then, because I think I'm still feeling pain. And pain isn't the enemy. Pain is there to keep us safe. It's a case of, are we interpreting it in the correct way? Or if a doctor says, well, we would expect this condition to have been resolved within this time frame. And those individuals, particularly if they've got perfectionist tendencies, will then mark down on the calendar, well, I'm not better now, and I've only got one more day to go, and I should be better. Oh, something terrible must be happening. But when we're invited to have a proper conversation with that individual because they've sought our care or counselling, and we can say, well, you know, maybe that doctor didn't appreciate that you're also worried about your mum and you're making these visits to the hospital, and your children are going through their GCSEs and they are going through adolescence. So they're also just pushing some boundaries here, and there is a lot going on. Maybe that doctor didn't fully appreciate that your body was also using energy for all of those different things. So in doing that, it had less energy to focus on the healing from that operation that you've just had. Doesn't mean it's broken, doesn't mean anything terrible's happening. It just means it's going to take you longer to get there because of all of the different things that is vying for your energy attention right now. That's a very different dialogue, and that person's nervous system can sort of go, oh, okay, that makes more sense. I'm not going to be quite so frightened because of, yes, I am doing all of those other things as well. And that's what we've got to look at. How much energy is in the system and how much is already being utilized for Project X and Project Y, in which case, how much is left over for the longer term building projects of the you relative to everything else that's vied for its attention.
And that being heard and being understood is something that I hear constantly from the people that we work with. And how important would you say that is in people's recovery or managing or living with their conditions? You know, that sense of feeling heard and understood.
Massive. I mean, I think it's everything. That's all people want is validation. And, you know, I'm not going mad, some context, it's all about the paradigm that we see things through. And, you know, because our world has become so medical model focused, we've stopped looking at all of the factors that make us human, all of the things we're all navigating all day long, that all have an on cost on our systems. You know, our body is just this fantastic, amazing, you know, healing system that's just trying to go about its job every day to try and keep some level of balance and homeostasis. As Donna said, it's all about survival, and it's signaling to us, is giving us clues, but we've stopped learning to listen to the clues because we're so driven by, well, that's not normal, there must be something wrong, and because we've lost an ability to really listen and understand what our body's trying to tell us, because we maybe don't get that explanation from the people that we're initially going to ask for help about. So often when you get the opportunity to start to sit with somebody and really hear the story, they start putting the pieces together. I never realized that was relevant in why I haven't recovered so well from that, or why, I know so and so and he's got the same as me and he doesn't have the same level of fatigue as I do. So why am I getting fatigue? And why is the doctor saying that it isn't to do with that? And when you get the context of everything else that a person is actually having to navigate, or even, holding a lot of stress from past stuff that's happened, or, that there are so many variables. Human beings are fascinating and interesting and completely individual, and we need personalized medicine. But unfortunately, it's all about a sausage factory of you either fit in a box that goes there or there or there, rather than a holistic service that can potentially look at and meet the needs to enable people. I'm exactly like Donna. We have a strong ethos in our team in that there's no such thing as an unresourceful person, just an unresourceful state, and the person is the best expert. We're just there with a body of knowledge that may then offer some value to them to decide whether some of the stuff is of use to them to navigate their lives in a better direction. Yeah, and that to me is a health service, not how some of it is set up.
So how do we, one of the things that people have told us is that through the project that we've done around energy limiting conditions, they wanted to give people hope. So where does hope lie in this for people when they've got those layers? As you say, people are beautiful and complex. They've got all these emotions going on. They've got this possible sense of being misunderstood or not heard. Where does hope lie for people?
I think that's a good one for you, Donna.
I think hope is incredibly important. One of the things that perhaps is missing from conventional medicine, because it's a very pathogenic model, what is the matter with someone rather than what is the what does matter for someone. And one of the things that we need to have more of is compassion. Compassion is hugely important in terms of I see you and I hear you. And I'm going to sit with this, and between us, we are going to look at how we can shift from where you are. And for some people, it can feel hopeless. And this is where your project comes into its own, Vicky, and all your people with, the people that you work with and their lived experience. When one is in a state of hopelessness, it's a case of, is this as good as it gets? This is too hard. This is too painful. My life is so diminished. When you have someone else with lived experience, or when you have a healthcare provider who is compassionate to where you are, they can provide you with some hope. They can give you some hope. You can borrow some of their hope until you are in a state that you can build your own. And so for me, when we are supporting patients, whatever their journey has been into their energy depleting state, it's about making them have a felt sense of safety. Safety precedes everything. And part of that is stabilizing where they're at. Then it's a case of, and now how do you build energy? Because it's not like plugging your phone in and letting it charge. You have to build it. You can't wait for it to happen. And then when you have that energy, where do you want to direct it? But until someone's in that felt sense of safety, those other things aren't available to them. And that's when offering someone else hope that other people have walked a similar journey to you. And despite all the challenges, despite all the narrative that they had in here, they actually moved from their position of feeling stuck into something that felt much more valuable to them.
There's lots of layers to hope, isn't there? Because I think, you know, I mean, many years ago I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and you know, the whole emphasis of hope in the most hopeless situations, you know, the concentration camps, and the difference between the people who held hope that they would get back to their families, they would get back to a life again, and what it did physiologically to the body. And there's so many studies that look at how the body responds when it has a target, a focus, in order a belief system that something can improve. And I think the narrative that frustrates me greatly because of this, the way, you know, maybe a lot is written online, is one of hopelessness. You've just got to live with this. You've just got to get on with it. This is your life now. And I don't know any human being that maybe will be happy with that, but maybe there are levels that you can work towards that give you a sense of hope that you could, you know, achieve or change your goals in life and focus in life, that give you a sense of purpose and meaning back, a sense of feeling some value in your existence and what you do every day. But if all that's fed back to you is, I've got nothing else to offer, there's nothing else I can give you, you've got to get on with it, you know, then that's a tough thing for any human being, you know. But I don't know whether I'm just a ridiculously optimistic, you know, therapist, but I do believe everybody can find hope in something. I just think, you know, we don't know enough yet. You know, we're learning all the time, and I think we need to always keep an open mind. I think anybody that knows what's happening in the body 100% probably needs to go back and relook at things, because we don't know. We're learning all the time. We do the best we can with what we understand about what helps energy, what hinders energy, all the different factors, you know, based on a person's individual circumstances that can impact. I think from my perspective, we don't understand energy properly. And so I think to say that people cannot find a way to, in some way, support or stabilize their energy system, I think is, and I have to be cautious here because there are so many different variables within this, and I don't in any way want to make somebody who's really struggling to manage their energy feel bad. But I do believe that there is always a way forward if we're looking at it through the right lens. And I think it's, you know, for us, the biggest frustration is in the commissioning of fatigue services. Obviously, we have a pot for ME/CFS, but I believe that, you know, my big and Donna's big blue sky thinking is that all people, you know, that fatigue should be recognized. Well, you know, when all other medical conditions are, you know, we may not find that they are accepted in our service because we're very specific under our NICE guidelines. However, you know, what we do would be incredibly helpful for them with the right resources. they're all for people to really sit and hear how we approach it and kind of, oh, I've never really considered that. That's a really good idea. And let me give that a go, or let me look at that. They can get marginal gains in things that then starts to, maybe open up their creativity again, or other opportunities, or just things that they never thought they'd be able to even consider doing again. Suddenly, think life becomes a little bit more hopeful. So, anything you'd add, Donna? Because I think it's a massive subject in terms of...
It is a massive subject. And for anybody watching this, first of all, thank you so much for spending some of your precious time and energy watching this. And I sincerely, sincerely hope that some of what we have said has resonated with you, because we really want to reach you, and we really want to know that you are important and that you do matter. Yes, Lynsey and I and Vicky and other people like us have a bigger picture idea. And one of the things that unfortunately is really missing in medicine is preventative medicine. How do we give the skills, the understanding to everybody from the very onset of this is how to take care of ourselves? And all we can say is we are striving to make those changes, but changes take a long time to happen. They take a long time to happen. And as Lynsey says, we don't fully understand all the ins and outs of energy, how it's truly created, what can cause challenges for it. However, work is going on behind the scenes for that too. One of the analogies that I sometimes use, and it may be helpful, it may not be helpful, but we often talk about working within an energy envelope. And I use the analogy, as perhaps many of us do, of the bank account. When we are in a healthful state, we are making daily deposits into our bank account. Now, that might be going for walks in nature. It's doing the things that you love for the sheer joy of doing that. That this is what life is about, those moments of awe and wonder. And if we have a really good nest egg there, that's great, because that can take us through some of the challenges. Because every single thing that we do in life has the propensity for us to make a withdrawal. And for those individuals with energy depleting conditions, they can be making far too many withdrawals. And then, just like a bank account, you go into the red.
And all those pillars.
So there's payback.
Those pillars that we do know, the breath work, making sure we're breathing optimally, because when we're fatigued, our posture can slump, our whole body language, our body starts breathing very shallowly, and our body can't make energy. So, really looking at how we could support our breathing, learn how to do more restorative rest, connect with nature, get our sleep cycles better regulated, get daylight. Look at our gut health. What can we better do to support our gut health? Just look at what the body needs, the core basics of what the body needs, connection with others, a sense of meaning and purpose in your day, no matter how small, that some of these absolute basics are what we often need to go back and revisit to make sure we've got that right. Even just, I have, a number of individuals on my caseload who have phenomenal responsibilities. I mean, I'm in awe of their resilience to do what they need to do whilst dealing with their health problems. But they also get to a point where they go, actually, I've got to be healthily selfish, haven't I? I've got to start looking at my needs as well. Absolutely. The put your own oxygen mask on first. Is that okay? because there's something in a type of personality that's always giving to everybody else, always making sure everybody else is okay before they say, right, I can have some time for me now. And actually that's got to come top of the tree, really, for your body to hear that you value it. You value it enough to give it this restorative rest, to give it this good nutrition, to give it that, no, I can't do that today. Thanks for asking, but, I really need to listen to what my body's telling me. All of these sort of building blocks of a house, I think we've talked about it on the podcast, haven't we, Vicky, where we get the foundation strong, and then the bricks can go on of all those other things. But sometimes those foundations are a bit weak. And so actually going back and revisiting them, some of the practical strategies around human health, just what the body needs to help itself heal and allow its energy systems to run more efficiently, we're not told about. Because 100% what I'd like to leave people with is you are doing the best you can with what you know. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not deliberately causing this. You are doing the best you can.
You don't need more willpower. We know you definitely don't need more willpower. And I would add that often we can intellectualize something. Well, typically this is what we do. We intellectualize something before perhaps we can have embodied it. So people may think, but I've tried everything. And it's a case of, well, what is the trying look like? What does that mean to you? Because we can have all the tools in here. But going back to what you were saying, Lynsey, about connection, one of the things that happens when people are in a very distressed state is that they do become very diminished. Life is all about the anxiety for the future and that hopelessness, etc. So there is that disconnect from one's body as well. So we remain very up here in all this internal dialogue and perhaps negative narrative, and then the tools may not be accessible. And so when you're sitting with a practitioner who's saying, well, just do this or just do that, that can be very, very difficult, because if the system is not ready to incorporate that, then it won't happen. And a case in point is nowhere in the history of ever has saying to somebody in a highly distressed situation, perhaps about to have a panic attack, calm down. That's almost like adding fuel to the fire. Their internal state is threat, and yet the external directive is calm down. That's incongruent with what their system is telling them. So again, this goes back to feeling safe first, and feeling safe first can be connecting with someone who's deeply listening.
I think you've been very generous with your time, but I need to let you get back to work because you've got so many people to support. I've got a feeling we could chat for hours, and there's so much that you've got to give for people.
You should get Donna on a podcast.
Do you know what? It's on my to-do list already now. So just finally, I suspect people that have heard you two speaking on this video will be now queuing up to want to see you. On a very, very practical note, if there's somebody that's newly diagnosed or newly experienced in this, or they're further down the line and they don't feel as though they've had support, how do they get to see you? How do they get that support?
Well, as you know, we are only commissioned for ME/CFS, and we have very tight referral criteria. And obviously we are looking at all sorts of other factors that we are very careful when we're triaging. So people have to go through the GP. We require all the medical tests to be done, recent bloods, to ensure that everything's been medically looked at and treated to an optimal level before we can start to consider whether we are the appropriate service for a person. So essentially, to get to see myself or Donna within the MECFS service, we require that to be the diagnosis. So the GP will often think it might look like that and refer to us, but we're very thorough with our triaging process, and we'll often write very robust reports back about why we've not accepted, but give advice for what we would recommend them do, maybe some self-help guidance as well, because the bigger picture is we would love to house a fatigue service. So yeah, but I don't know if it's probably it's not a bad thing to say that Donna also does private work. So she's a private GP as well at the Fitzwilliam Hospital in Peterborough. So she also has a practice there as well if people wanted to seek her out. So yeah.
Great stuff.